Marcus Chen wiped sweat from his forehead as he checked the atmospheric readings on his tablet. The mining colony on Dracaris Prime had been his home for 3 years now, and he still marveled at the alien world's beauty. Purple skies stretched endlessly above crystalline mountains, while bioluminescent plants dotted the landscape like scattered jewels. But today felt different. Something in the air carried an electric tension that made his skin prickle. The xenobiology team had departed 2 days ago, leaving Marcus alone to maintain the environmental monitoring station. He preferred the solitude anyway. After losing his family in the Mars colony disaster, quiet work among alien creatures brought him more peace than human company ever could. The local wildlife had grown accustomed to his presence, treating him like part of the landscape. Marcus adjusted his thermal jacket and resumed calibrating the atmospheric sensors when he heard a soft whimpering that didn't belong to any documented Dracaris species. He paused, listening carefully. The sound came again, more urgent this time, like distressed young animals calling for help. Following the noise led him through a grove of silverleaf trees toward the rocky outcroppings where he'd never ventured before. The whimpering grew louder, accompanied by small scratching sounds. Marcus pushed aside some low-hanging crystalline branches and stopped in amazement. 2 tiny creatures no larger than house cats huddled against a warm thermal vent in the rocks. They had scales that shimmered between deep blue and emerald green, small wings folded against their backs, and elongated necks that marked them unmistakably as dragon hatchlings. Their large golden eyes tracked his movement with intelligence that seemed far beyond their apparent age. Marcus had heard stories from other colony worlds about dragon-like species, but Dracaris Prime surveys had never documented anything like these creatures. The hatchlings trembled despite the thermal vent's warmth, their tiny claws clicking against the stone as they shifted nervously. "Hey there, little ones," Marcus said softly, crouching several feet away. "Where's your mama?" The larger hatchling, distinguished by a small crest of silver scales along its head, took a tentative step toward him. Its sibling followed hesitantly, both creatures moving with the unsteady gait of very young animals. As they approached, Marcus noticed their scales had lost some of their luster, and their movements seemed weak. Without warning, both hatchlings suddenly rushed toward him, tiny claws gently grasping at his thermal jacket. They pressed against him, seeking warmth and comfort. Their small bodies trembled with exhaustion and cold, despite the nearby thermal vent. Marcus's heart melted. These babies were clearly orphaned and struggling to survive. He carefully gathered them against his chest, feeling their tiny hearts beating rapidly. The warmth from his jacket seemed to calm them immediately, and they nestled closer with soft chirping sounds. "All right, you two," he whispered. "Let's get you somewhere safe." Marcus carried the hatchlings back to the monitoring station, a modest prefabricated structure that served as both workplace and living quarters. Inside, he created a makeshift nest using thermal blankets near the heating unit. The hatchlings immediately curled up together, their breathing becoming more relaxed. Over the next several hours, Marcus researched everything he could find about dragon-type species from other worlds. The information was scattered and often contradictory, but common threads emerged. Dragon hatchlings required specific mineral supplements, maintained higher body temperatures than most species, and possessed remarkable intelligence even at young ages. He improvised a feeding solution using mineral supplements from the Geological Survey Kit, mixed with purified water and protein paste from his emergency rations. The hatchlings sniffed the mixture cautiously before lapping it up eagerly. Their scales brightened noticeably after eating. The larger hatchling, which Marcus began calling Silver for its distinctive crest, showed particular boldness. It explored the station while its sibling Emerald, for its more vivid green coloring, preferred to stay close to the warm nest. Both creatures watched Marcus with constant attention, as if studying his every movement. As evening approached, Marcus settled at his workstation to complete the day's environmental reports. The twin hatchlings had been sleeping peacefully, but, as he began typing, he felt small claws gently tugging at his jacket sleeve. Looking down, he saw Silver and Emerald gazing up at him with pleading eyes. They chirped softly, a sound that somehow conveyed both affection and a request for attention. When he reached down to pet them, they pressed against his hand with surprising warmth. "You just want company, don't you?" Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in months. He lifted both hatchlings onto his lap, where they settled contentedly while he worked. Their presence felt natural, as if they belonged there. Silver occasionally reached up with one tiny paw to touch his hand, while Emerald curled into a perfect circle and dozed. Marcus found himself talking to them as he worked, explaining the atmospheric readings and environmental data in simple terms. The hatchlings listened with apparent interest, their heads tilting at his voice. Silver even made small chirping responses that sounded almost conversational. When the evening report was complete, Marcus prepared for sleep. He placed the hatchlings in their thermal nest and moved to his own bunk. But, within minutes, he heard soft whimpering again. The little creatures were calling for him. "You don't want to sleep alone either," he said, understanding completely. Marcus brought his sleeping bag near their nest and lay down beside them. The hatchlings immediately crawled over to snuggle against his warmth. Silver draped itself across his shoulder, while Emerald curled up near his chest. Their gentle breathing and the soft rumble of contented purring lulled him into the most peaceful sleep he'd experienced in years. During the night, Marcus woke to find the temperature outside had dropped significantly. The heating unit was working, but the hatchlings were shivering despite their nest. Without hesitation, he unzipped his thermal jacket and gently placed it over them like a blanket. The effect was immediate. Both creatures snuggled deeper into the warmth, their shivering stopped, and they returned to peaceful sleep. Marcus lay there in his lighter shirt, watching them rest comfortably. The cold didn't bother him much, his time on various colony worlds had toughened him against temperature extremes. But, more than that, he realized these tiny creatures had already begun healing something broken inside him. For the first time since losing his family, he felt needed and wanted. The hatchlings hadn't chosen him for any practical reason, they simply trusted him completely. As dawn approached, Marcus carefully retrieved his jacket without disturbing the sleeping hatchlings. They had grown visibly stronger overnight, their scales now gleaming with healthy iridescence. When they woke, both creatures looked at him with what he could only describe as gratitude and affection. The morning brought new challenges. Marcus needed to complete several equipment maintenance tasks that would require him to work outside for most of the day. The hatchlings clearly didn't want to be separated from him, following him around the station with persistent chirping. "I can't take you outside yet," he explained patiently. "The temperature fluctuations could hurt you, and there might be predators." Silver tilted its head and made a sound that almost resembled disagreement. Emerald moved to stand beside its sibling, both creatures looking up at him with determined expressions. Marcus laughed despite himself. These little dragons already had distinct personalities and strong opinions. He spent extra time setting up their nest with multiple heat sources and fresh water before heading outside. The maintenance work proved more complex than expected. One of the atmospheric sensors had developed a fault that required complete recalibration. Marcus worked steadily through the morning, occasionally glancing back at the station where he could see two small faces watching him through the window. Around midday, as he struggled with a particularly stubborn calibration sequence, Marcus heard familiar chirping behind him. He turned to find both hatchlings had somehow gotten outside and were approaching him determinedly. "How did you?" he began, then noticed the station door was slightly ajar. These clever little creatures had figured out how to work the manual release. Before he could decide whether to scold them or be impressed, he heard a low growling sound from the nearby rocks. A predator had detected the hatchling's scent. Marcus saw movement in the shadows, something large with too many teeth was stalking toward the vulnerable babies. Without thinking, Marcus stepped between the threat and the hatchlings, spreading his arms wide to appear larger. The predator hesitated, clearly not having expected to face an adult human protecting its apparent prey. The hatchlings had different ideas about the situation. Silver and Emerald moved to flank Marcus, their tiny chests puffing out as they attempted threatening displays. Their small size made the gesture almost comical, but their courage was unmistakable. "No, babies," Marcus said firmly. "Get behind me." Instead, Silver let out a surprisingly loud roar for such a small creature. The sound echoed off the rocks with unexpected resonance. Emerald joined in, and together they created a noise that seemed much larger than their size should have allowed. The predator backed away, apparently deciding that creatures making such confident sounds might not be as helpless as they appeared. It disappeared into the rocky maze, leaving the unlikely family alone. Marcus scooped up both hatchlings, his heart pounding. "You brave little fools," he said, but his voice was full of affection. "We're a team now, aren't we?" Both creatures chirped agreement, snuggling against him as he carried them back to the station. But, this time, instead of leaving them inside, Marcus set up a mobile warming pad where they could stay near him while he worked. The hatchlings watched intently as he completed the sensor calibration, occasionally offering small chirps of encouragement. When Marcus explained what he was doing, they listened with focused attention that suggested they were actually learning from his words. As the afternoon progressed, Marcus realized his life had fundamentally changed. These weren't just animals he was caring for, they were becoming family. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. He'd lost family before, and the pain had nearly destroyed him. But, watching Silver and Emerald play together in the afternoon sun, seeing their trust and affection, Marcus knew he couldn't protect himself by staying distant. These little creatures had chosen him, and he was choosing them back. When evening came, Marcus completed his work with unusual efficiency. The hatchlings had remained close throughout the day, and their presence had somehow made even routine tasks feel meaningful again. As they prepared to return inside, both creatures tugged gently at his jacket, their new signal that they wanted his attention and warmth. Marcus smiled and gathered them close, letting them burrow into his jacket's warmth as they walked back to the station together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they were a family of three, finding comfort in each other's presence on a beautiful, dangerous alien world. The twin dragon hatchlings had pulled at his jacket seeking warmth, and Marcus had given them everything he could offer. In return, they had given him something he thought he'd lost forever, a reason to hope for tomorrow. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus first found Silver and Emerald, and the changes in both the hatchlings and himself were remarkable. The tiny dragons had grown noticeably, their wings developing more defined structure and their scales deepening in color and brilliance. More importantly, their bond with Marcus had strengthened into something that felt ancient and profound. Marcus had established new routines that accommodated his unusual companions. Each morning, he would check the environmental sensors while Silver and Emerald explored the immediate area around the station. They never wandered far, always staying within sight and returning the moment he called. Their intelligence continued to amaze him, they seemed to understand not just his words but his intentions and emotions. The supply drop from the main colony wasn't due for another month, but Marcus had received an unexpected communication. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the xenobiology team leader, was returning early with a small research team. She detected anomalous life sign readings from the monitoring station's automated reports and wanted to investigate. Marcus felt a knot of anxiety forming in his stomach. The readings Dr. Vasquez had detected were almost certainly from Silver and Emerald. While he'd been careful to mark them as unidentified local fauna in his reports, their unique signatures had apparently caught scientific attention. He looked at the hatchlings, who were currently engaged in what appeared to be a game of aerial tag around the station's communication array. Silver had become quite agile in the air, while Emerald preferred ground-based tactics but could make impressive leaps. Their playful chirping filled the air with joy. The thought of losing them made Marcus's chest tight with panic. He'd grown to love these little creatures more than he'd thought possible. They weren't just pets or research subjects, they were family. The idea of them being taken away for study or relocated to a research facility was unthinkable. That evening, as Marcus worked on his daily reports with Silver draped across his shoulders and Emerald curled in his lap, he made a decision. When the research team arrived, he would present Silver and Emerald not as discovered specimens, but as integrated members of the monitoring station's ecosystem. He'd emphasized their contribution to his work and their apparent sentience. The next morning brought unexpected challenges. Marcus woke to find Silver standing at the station's main window, scales slightly darkened with what he'd learned indicated anxiety or alertness. Emerald was pressed against his sibling, both creatures staring intently at something outside. Following their gaze, Marcus saw movement in the distance. A group of creatures he'd never seen before was approaching the station, larger than the local fauna, moving with purpose and intelligence. They appeared to be some kind of reptilian species, walking upright with sophisticated tools and equipment. "Well, this is new," Marcus muttered, reaching for his observation binoculars. Through the lenses, he got a clearer view of the approaching group. There were 5 individuals, each standing about 7 feet tall with scales similar in pattern to Silver and Emerald but darker and more metallic in appearance. They wore what appeared to be woven fabric garments and carried tools that looked both organic and technological. The hatchling's behavior became increasingly agitated. Silver made low, thrumming sounds while Emerald paced nervously. Whatever these creatures were, the babies recognized them and were afraid. Marcus's protective instincts kicked into high gear. He quickly activated the station's defensive protocols, which included energy barriers and warning systems. Then, he gathered Silver and Emerald close to him. It's okay, he said softly, though his own heart was racing. I won't let anything happen to you. The approaching creatures stopped about 15 meters from the station. One of them, distinguished by more elaborate garments and a crest of silver scales similar to Silver's, stepped forward. It raised one hand in what appeared to be a peaceful gesture and spoke in a language that sounded like musical wind chimes mixed with low harmonics. Marcus activated the station's translation protocols, hoping the basic linguistic analysis software could make sense of the communication. After several minutes of processing, a partial translation appeared on his screen: greetings, Sikhs, young ones, return, family. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. These weren't random aliens, they were likely Silver and Emerald's people, come to reclaim the hatchlings. The baby's fear suggested this reunion might not be welcome. The lead creature spoke again, this time more urgently. The translation software managed: human, danger, young ones, come now, safe place. Silver and Emerald pressed closer to Marcus, their small bodies trembling. Whatever relationship these hatchlings had with their own species, it clearly involved fear rather than joy at reunion. Marcus made another decision that surprised him with its immediacy and certainty. He activated the station's external communication system and spoke clearly: the young ones are under my protection. They stay with me. The translation software worked in reverse, converting his words into the musical language of the visitors. The effect on the group was immediate. They began talking among themselves in rapid, agitated tones. The leader stepped closer to the station's perimeter, its voice taking on what sounded like commanding tones. The translation came through: human, understand not, young ones, belong, family, duty, return. I understand perfectly, Marcus replied. They're afraid of you. They stay here. More agitated discussion among the visitors. Marcus noticed some of them were examining the station's defenses, possibly looking for weaknesses. He casually adjusted the energy barrier's strength and made sure his sidearm was easily accessible. The standoff continued for several tense minutes. Then, something unexpected happened. Silver, still pressed against Marcus but no longer trembling, let out a series of musical chirps directed at the visitors. The sounds were different from the playful noises Marcus usually heard, more formal and structured, like a language. The adult creatures stopped their discussion and listened intently to Silver's communication. When the hatchling finished, there was stunned silence from the group. Emerald added their own series of chirps, shorter but equally formal. The adult creatures exchanged what appeared to be amazed looks. The leader approached the station's communication range again and spoke more slowly. The translation was clearer this time: young ones, speak, protection, gratitude, choice, unusual, must consider. Marcus felt a surge of hope. They can choose? Choose, yes, if, prove worthy, protection, human. The conversation that followed was unlike anything Marcus could have imagined. Through the translation software and the hatchling's occasional interpretive chirps, he learned that Silver and Emerald were indeed members of this species, the Draconis, as they called themselves. However, they weren't just any hatchlings. They were twins, which was extremely rare, and they carried genetic markers that made them highly valued by their society. The problem was that their society believed in a rigid caste system. Silver and Emerald had been designated for roles that would separate them permanently: Silver for a warrior caste and Emerald for a scholarly caste. The hatchlings had apparently fled rather than accept this separation. Human, understand, twins, bond, strong, separation, death of spirit, the leader explained through the translation system. Marcus felt his anger rising. So you destroy their bond for your social structure? Ways, ancient, necessary, order, survival. Your ways are wrong, Marcus said firmly. These babies belong together. They're happy here, they're growing strong, and they're free to be themselves. The discussion among the adult Draconis became more heated. Marcus could see the group was divided. Some seemed to agree with their leader's traditional stance, while others appeared to be arguing for a different approach. Finally, the leader spoke again: human, prove, worthy guardian, challenge, accept. Marcus looked down at Silver and Emerald, who were watching him with complete trust in their golden eyes. What kind of challenge? Survive, 3 trials, wisdom, courage, devotion, succeed, young ones, choose freely, fail, return, tradition. The terms were explained over the next hour. Marcus would face 3 tests designed to prove his worthiness as a guardian for the twins. The first would test his wisdom in understanding their needs, the second would test his courage in protecting them, and the third would test his devotion to their well-being above his own desires. If he succeeded, Silver and Emerald would be free to choose their own path. If he failed, they would return to traditional Draconis society and the separation that would follow. "How long do I have to prepare?" Marcus asked. "No preparation, trials begin now." The first trial was announced immediately. Marcus would need to demonstrate his understanding of proper hatchling care by providing for their needs during a 3-day period without any of his human technology or supplies. He would be given basic tools and materials similar to what wild Draconis used, and the adult dragons would observe from a distance. Marcus accepted without hesitation, though his stomach churned with anxiety. Silver and Emerald chirped encouragement, pressing against him with obvious confidence in his abilities. The Draconis provided him with organic materials, plant fibers that could be woven, stones that generated heat when properly arranged, and information about local plants that provided nutrition for hatchlings. Then, they withdrew to a respectful distance to observe. The first challenge was shelter. Without his heated station, Marcus needed to create a warm, safe space for the twins. He remembered techniques from survival training and began gathering materials. Silver and Emerald helped, bringing him suitable stones and pointing out useful plants they seemed to recognize instinctively. Working together, they built a shelter using interwoven branches and plant fibers, with a floor of heat-generating stones arranged in a pattern the adult Draconis had shown him. The structure wasn't pretty, but it was warm and weatherproof. Food was the next challenge. The provided information about edible plants was helpful, but Marcus had to learn quickly which varieties the hatchlings preferred and how to prepare them properly. Silver and Emerald's reactions guided him. They would chirp approval for good choices and gently reject unsuitable options. By the end of the first day, they had a functioning camp that met the hatchlings' basic needs. But Marcus realized the trial wasn't just about survival skills, it was about understanding that Silver and Emerald were not pets or specimens, but intelligent beings with their own preferences and knowledge. "You two know more about this than I do, don't you?" he said as they settled down for the night in their primitive but warm shelter. Silver chirped agreement while Emerald nuzzled against him affectionately. They were teaching him as much as he was caring for them. The second day brought improved efficiency as Marcus learned to work with the hatchlings rather than simply providing for them. They showed him better locations for gathering food, warned him away from potentially dangerous areas, and even helped with construction tasks using their small but dexterous claws. By the third day, their temporary camp had become a functioning microecosystem. The watching Draconis observers seemed impressed, particularly when they saw how naturally the twins communicated with Marcus and how much they had contributed to their own care. When the 3 days ended, the leader of the adult Draconis approached the camp. First trial, complete, wisdom, demonstrated, young ones, partners not burdens, understanding, good. Marcus felt relief wash over him, but he knew 2 more trials remained. The real tests were yet to come. That evening, as they returned to the monitoring station, Silver and Emerald seemed proud of what they'd accomplished together. They chattered excitedly about their adventure, and Marcus realized they had enjoyed the challenge almost as much as he had. But tomorrow would bring the second trial, the test of courage. And Marcus suspected it would be far more dangerous than building shelters and gathering food. The second trial began at dawn with an announcement that chilled Marcus to his core. The test of courage would require him to venture into the Crystal Caverns, a dangerous underground maze where predatory creatures hunted in perpetual darkness. His task was to retrieve a specific mineral formation called a bondstone from the deepest chamber while keeping Silver and Emerald safe. The adult Draconis explained that bondstones were traditionally given to pairs who wished to remain together despite social conventions. Finding one would symbolically demonstrate Marcus's commitment to preserving the twins' relationship, but the journey would be fraught with deadly perils. "Why can't I leave them here while I go?" Marcus asked, though he suspected the answer. Trial, tests, protection, real danger, separation, not option, prove, keep safe, all circumstances. Marcus studied the cavern entrance, a narrow opening in the cliff face that seemed to exhale cold, stale air. Local wildlife avoided the area completely, which spoke volumes about the dangers within. He checked his equipment, basic climbing gear, a chemical light source that would last only a few hours, and emergency rations. No weapons beyond a simple knife, no advanced technology. Silver and Emerald seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Their usual playfulness was replaced by alert readiness. They stayed close to Marcus, their scales slightly darkened with concentration. "All right, team," Marcus said, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "We stick together, we watch each other's backs, and we don't take any unnecessary risks." The twins chirped agreement, and the unlikely trio entered the caverns. The initial passages were merely uncomfortable, narrow, cold, and filled with dripping sounds that echoed ominously in the darkness. Marcus's light revealed walls covered in crystalline formations that sparkled beautifully but offered little practical guidance for navigation. Silver and Emerald proved invaluable as they progressed deeper. Their draconic heritage included superior low-light vision, and they frequently guided Marcus away from unstable areas or dangerous drop-offs he couldn't see. They also seemed to possess an instinctive understanding of the cavern's layout, leading him toward passages that felt more stable and secure. The first real danger appeared after they'd been underground for nearly 2 hours. Marcus heard a skittering sound that didn't belong to any creature he'd encountered on the surface. He held up his hand, signaling for silence, and listened carefully. The sound came again, multiple legs moving rapidly across stone surfaces, accompanied by a clicking that suggested mandibles or claws. Something was hunting them. Silver and Emerald pressed against his legs, their bodies tense. When Marcus looked down, he saw their scales had darkened to deep blue-black, a camouflage coloration he'd never seen before. They were preparing for danger. The creatures revealed themselves as the light source began to flicker, its chemical reaction was weakening. 6 spider-like beings the size of large dogs emerged from crevices in the cavern walls. Their crystalline exoskeletons reflected the dying light in menacing patterns, and their multiple eyes tracked the intruders with predatory intelligence. Marcus had 3 options: retreat and fail the trial, fight creatures he knew nothing about with inadequate weapons, or find a creative alternative. As the spiders began to advance, he noticed something about their movement patterns. They avoided certain areas of the floor where particular crystal formations grew. "The crystals," he whispered to Silver and Emerald. "They don't like something about those specific crystals." Acting on intuition, Marcus grabbed a piece of the avoided crystal formation and held it forward. The approaching spiders immediately recoiled, their aggressive postures changing to obvious discomfort. Electromagnetic fields, Marcus realized. These crystals generate some kind of field that interferes with their nervous systems. Working quickly, he gathered several of the crystal pieces and distributed them around their group. The spiders retreated to a safe distance but continued to watch, clearly waiting for an opportunity to attack. The problem was that they needed to continue deeper into the caverns, but the crystal formation Marcus was using for protection was stationary. Moving away from this area would expose them to the predators again. Silver approached one of the crystal pieces and chirped softly, then did something unexpected. The hatchling breathed on the crystal, and it began to glow with a soft internal light. Emerald immediately imitated the action with another piece, creating a second glowing crystal. "You can activate them," Marcus said with amazement. "Your breath contains something that energizes the crystalline matrix." The twins had given them a solution. Marcus carefully broke off portable pieces of the crystal, and Silver and Emerald activated each one with their breath. Soon they had enough glowing crystals to create a moving barrier of protection. The spider creatures followed at a distance as they continued deeper, clearly frustrated by their inability to attack but unwilling to give up the hunt completely. Marcus's respect for the twins' intelligence and capabilities continued to grow. They weren't just companions on this journey, they were essential partners. The cavern system grew more complex as they descended, with multiple branching passages and chambers filled with bizarre geological formations. Marcus relied increasingly on Silver and Emerald's instinctive navigation abilities, while they depended on his problem-solving skills to overcome obstacles like narrow passages and unstable rock formations. In one chamber, they encountered an underground stream that blocked their path. The water was deep and fast-moving, with no obvious way across. Traditional thinking would suggest finding an alternative route, but time was becoming a factor. The activated crystals wouldn't glow forever. Emerald surprised Marcus by approaching the water's edge and making a series of complex chirping sounds. The sounds echoed strangely in the chamber, and, after several minutes, something responded from beneath the water. A creature emerged that looked like a cross between a fish and a small dragon, clearly another native species. Emerald continued the chirping conversation while Silver added occasional comments. Somehow, the twins were communicating with this aquatic being. The result was unexpected cooperation. The fish dragon creature allowed them to ride across the stream, apparently understanding their urgent need for passage. In return, Silver and Emerald shared some of their activated crystals, which seemed to delight the aquatic helper. "You two have a gift for making friends," Marcus said as they continued their journey on dry ground. The deepest chamber proved to be a vast underground cathedral filled with crystal formations of impossible beauty. Pillars of pure minerals stretched from floor to ceiling, creating a natural architecture that took Marcus's breath away. And, in the center of the chamber, growing from the floor like a crystal tree, was the bondstone. The formation was magnificent, a double helix of intertwined crystal that pulsed with its own internal light. It seemed to represent the perfect union of two separate but connected elements, exactly what Silver and Emerald's relationship embodied. But the chamber wasn't unguarded. As they approached the bondstone, the largest predator Marcus had yet encountered emerged from behind the crystal pillars. It stood nearly 10 feet tall, with scales that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and claws that could easily shred metal. This was clearly the apex predator of the cavern system. The creature studied them with intelligence that was both alien and unmistakably hostile. It had probably been guarding this chamber for years, and it wasn't about to allow intruders to claim its treasure. Marcus positioned himself between the predator and the twins, but Silver and Emerald had different ideas. Instead of cowering behind him, they moved to flank the massive creature, their small forms taking on aggressive postures that would have been comical if the situation weren't so dangerous. "No," Marcus said firmly. "You two stay back. This one's too big." But the twins ignored his command. They began making sounds unlike any Marcus had heard before, deep, harmonious tones that seemed to resonate with the crystal formations throughout the chamber. The bondstone responded particularly strongly, its pulsing light synchronizing with their vocalizations. The effect on the guardian creature was dramatic. Its aggressive posture shifted to confusion, then, to what appeared to be recognition. It tilted its massive head, studying Silver and Emerald with new interest. Through their continued musical communication, something extraordinary happened. The guardian creature backed away from the bondstone, not in defeat but in apparent respect. It had recognized something in the twin song that granted them legitimate access to the chamber's treasure. Marcus approached the bondstone carefully, still ready to defend against attack, but the guardian creature made no aggressive moves. Instead, it watched with what seemed like approval as he carefully extracted a portion of the crystal formation, enough to prove he had reached the deepest chamber and retrieved the symbolic bondstone. The return journey proved much easier than the descent. The guardian creature actually guided them toward a shorter route to the surface, and the spider predators that had followed them down mysteriously vanished. It was as if the twins' demonstration of worthiness in the deepest chamber had granted them safe passage throughout the cavern system. They emerged into daylight to find the adult Draconis waiting anxiously. The leader approached immediately, examining the bondstone fragment Marcus carried. "Second trial, complete, courage, demonstrated, protection, wisdom, young ones, safe, bondstone, claimed, good." Marcus felt exhausted but triumphant. Silver and Emerald seemed energized by their adventure, chirping excitedly as they recounted their experiences to the adult dragons. The watching Draconis appeared impressed by the twins' capabilities and their obvious partnership with Marcus. But, even as he celebrated this success, Marcus knew the hardest trial lay ahead. The test of devotion would challenge not just his abilities, but his willingness to sacrifice for the twins' benefit. And he suspected it would force him to confront the deepest fears about his capacity to be the guardian these remarkable creatures deserved. That evening, as they rested in the monitoring station with the precious bondstone displayed prominently, Silver and Emerald curled up against Marcus with complete trust. They had faced mortal danger together and emerged stronger as a family unit. The leader of the adult Draconis had indicated that the third trial would begin the next morning, and it would be unlike the previous challenges. Instead of testing his skills or bravery, it would test the depths of his love for the twins and his understanding of what was truly best for their future. Marcus spent the night watching Silver and Emerald sleep peacefully, knowing that tomorrow might change everything. The bondstone pulsed gently in the darkness, a symbol of connection that transcended species boundaries. Whatever the final trial brought, he was determined to prove that love and dedication could overcome any obstacle. The twin dragon hatchlings had pulled at his jacket seeking warmth, and he had discovered that protecting them wasn't just about keeping them safe, it was about helping them become everything they were meant to be, together. The final trial arrived with the dawn, bringing news that shattered Marcus's world. Dr. Elena Vasquez and her research team had arrived early and were demanding immediate access to the unidentified specimens that had been detected near the monitoring station. Worse, the Galactic Research Consortium had issued emergency protocols requiring all newly discovered sentient species to be transferred to specialized facilities for study. The leader of the adult Draconis delivered the devastating information through the translation system: third trial, devotion, choice, surrender young ones, human authorities, safe futures, or fight, protection, risk, everything. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. The trial wasn't about proving his love for Silver and Emerald, it was about choosing between their safety and his desire to keep them. If he surrendered the twins to human authorities, they would be separated, studied, and eventually placed in facilities designed for alien species preservation. They would be safe, fed, and medically cared for, but they would never be free. If he refused to surrender them, he would be branded a criminal, hunted by both human and potentially alien authorities, and forced to live as a fugitive. Worse, Silver and Emerald would share the dangerous existence, facing uncertainty and potential harm. There has to be another option, Marcus said desperately. Third trial, tests, love, true love, chooses, best for beloved, not self, pain, necessary, growth. Silver and Emerald had been listening to the conversation with growing distress. They pressed against Marcus, chirping soft sounds of comfort as if they sensed his anguish. Looking into their trusting golden eyes, Marcus realized they didn't understand the full implications of the choice he faced. Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled over the communication system. Marcus Chan, this is Dr. Elena Vasquez. We have confirmed the presence of unregistered alien lifeforms at your location. Colony regulations require immediate containment and transfer of all specimens. We'll be at your position within 2 hours. Marcus activated the response channel with trembling hands. Dr. Vasquez, the creatures here are not specimens. They're sentient beings with family ties and complex social relationships. They've chosen to stay here. Chen, I understand you may have formed an attachment, but these beings require proper scientific evaluation and care. Their safety is our primary concern. The irony was crushing. Everyone claimed to want what was best for Silver and Emerald, but no one except Marcus had bothered to ask what the twins themselves wanted. The leader of the adult Draconis spoke again. Human Marcus, choose now: time, short, surrender, safety, or flee, danger, prove, devotion, sacrifice. Marcus looked at Silver and Emerald, who were watching him with complete faith in his judgment. They trusted him to make the right choice, even though they couldn't fully comprehend the consequences. That's when inspiration struck. There's a fourth option, Marcus said, his voice gaining strength. What if we let them choose for themselves? The adult Draconis leader tilted their head in confusion. Young ones cannot understand complexity, future consequences. Maybe not the full complexity, Marcus agreed, but they understand freedom versus captivity. They understand being together versus being separated. They understand love versus clinical care. He knelt down beside Silver and Emerald and spoke to them directly in the simple terms they could grasp. Little ones, some people are coming who want to take you to a place where you'll be safe and fed, but you'll be apart from each other and apart from me. Other people want us to run away together, which means we'll always have to hide and might face danger. Silver and Emerald exchanged a look that carried more communication than most humans achieved with words. Then, they moved to stand on either side of Marcus, their message clear. They've chosen, Marcus said to the watching Draconis. They want to stay together, and they want to stay with me. Isn't that what the trial was really about? Respecting their choice rather than making decisions for them? The adult Draconis fell into intense discussion among themselves. The translation system caught fragments: wisdom, unprecedented, young ones, choosing freely, tradition, challenged, new path. While the aliens debated, Marcus made preparations for the only option that honored the twins' choice. He couldn't surrender them to authorities who would separate them, and he couldn't force them to flee into danger. But he could fight for their right to choose their own future. When Dr. Vasquez's team arrived, they found Marcus standing outside the monitoring station with Silver and Emerald beside him, facing a group of adult alien dragons in what appeared to be some kind of formal gathering. Chen, what's the situation here? Dr. Vasquez called out, her team maintaining a cautious distance. The situation is that these young dragons have family, Marcus replied. And that family is conducting a legal proceeding to determine their custody. As the beings in question are demonstrably sentient and capable of expressing preferences, I believe galactic law requires recognition of their choices. The research team's xenoanthropologist stepped forward. Are you claiming these creatures have established legal standing? I'm claiming they have established family relationships, demonstrated intelligence, and expressed clear preferences about their future. The adult members of their species are here to ensure those preferences are respected. What followed was the most surreal legal discussion in Marcus's experience. Through the translation system, the leader of the adult Draconis explained their species' complex social structure, the significance of twin bonds, and the unprecedented nature of the trials Marcus had undergone. Dr. Vasquez found herself faced with a genuine first contact scenario, not just the discovery of a new species, but active diplomatic negotiations with representatives of a clearly advanced alien civilization. If these beings have established civilization and legal frameworks, the xenoanthropologist said slowly, then we may indeed need to recognize their custody proceedings. The leader of the adult Draconis addressed Dr. Vasquez directly. Human scientist, trials, completed, guardian, proven, worthy, young ones, choose freely, human Marcus, family now, law of our people, recognized. And what about our laws? Dr. Vasquez asked. The preservation protocols exist to protect species from exploitation. Guardian will be monitored, young ones, free to change, choice, anytime, return to people, always possible, protection, not imprisonment. Silver and Emerald had been following the discussion with obvious intelligence. When the translation system fell silent, they approached Dr. Vasquez's team and began making the formal chirping sounds Marcus had heard them use with their own species. They're trying to communicate with you directly, Marcus explained. They want you to understand this is their choice. The xenoanthropologist activated a recording device and analyzed the twins' vocalizations. The linguistic patterns suggest complex grammar and intentional communication. These beings are definitely sentient by any reasonable standard. Dr. Vasquez studied the scene, the formal arrangement of adult aliens, the obvious intelligence of the young ones, and Marcus's clear emotional bond with both. This isn't what we expected to find. It's what we found anyway, Marcus replied. And now we have to decide whether we're explorers who respect other forms of life, or conquerors who impose our will regardless of what others want. The decision that emerged satisfied no one completely but honored everyone's essential concerns. Silver and Emerald would remain with Marcus, but the monitoring station would become an official cultural exchange post. The twins would serve as ambassadors between humans and Draconis, helping both species understand each other better. Dr. Vasquez would establish regular check-ins to ensure the twins' well-being, while the adult Draconis would maintain their own monitoring presence. Most importantly, Silver and Emerald would have access to education about both cultures and the freedom to change their minds as they matured. This is unprecedented, Dr. Vasquez admitted as the formal agreements were recorded. But, then, first contact situations usually are. The leader of the adult Draconis approached Marcus for the final judgment of the trials. 3 trials, completed, wisdom, courage, devotion, proven, greatest trial, respecting choice, young ones, free, bond recognized, human Marcus, family now. They presented Marcus with an ornate pendant made from the same crystalline material as the bond stone. Guardian mark, recognized, all Draconis, young ones, under protection, honor, great. As the various groups dispersed to their new arrangements, Marcus found himself alone with Silver and Emerald for the first time in days. The twins seemed to understand that something momentous had occurred, but their primary concern was returning to their normal routine of exploration and play. We did it, Marcus told them as they settled into their familiar evening configuration, Silver draped across his shoulders while Emerald curled in his lap. You're free to choose your own future. The response was exactly what he'd hoped for. Both twins chirped contentment and snuggled closer, their choice clear and unwavering. Over the following weeks, the new arrangement proved successful beyond anyone's expectations. Silver and Emerald thrived in their role as cultural ambassadors, demonstrating remarkable ability to learn and teach. They helped Dr. Vasquez's team understand Draconis society while learning about human culture and technology. The twins grew rapidly, their intelligence developing in ways that amazed all observers. They learned to use basic technology, communicate in simple human language, and even help with the monitoring station's scientific work. But they never lost their playful nature or their deep bond with Marcus. The adult Draconis established a permanent outpost nearby, creating the first ongoing peaceful contact between humans and their species. Trade relationships developed, cultural exchanges flourished, and both civilizations benefited from the connection. Marcus found his role evolving from simple station monitor to cultural liaison and xenobiology consultant. More importantly, he had gained something he'd thought lost forever: a family that chose him as much as he chose them. On quiet evenings, when Silver and Emerald would tug gently at his jacket seeking warmth and attention, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed. He'd started as a lonely man maintaining equipment on a distant world. He'd become the guardian of two remarkable beings who had bridged the gap between species and opened new possibilities for peaceful coexistence. The twin dragon hatchlings had pulled at his jacket seeking warmth, and, in responding to that simple need, Marcus had discovered that love and respect could overcome any barrier: species boundaries, cultural differences, even legal obstacles. They had chosen each other as family, and that choice had created something unprecedented in the galaxy. Sometimes the most important decisions weren't about grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices. Sometimes they were about simply responding with warmth and care when someone small and vulnerable reached out for help. Silver and Emerald had taught him that protection meant enabling choice, not controlling it. As he watched them sleep peacefully in their nest beside his workstation, Marcus smiled with deep contentment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and adventures, but they would face them together as a family. The twins had pulled at his jacket seeking warmth, and he had discovered that the warmth of genuine love could transform not just individual lives, but entire worlds.